Welcome to the MBA News Digest webinar and podcast series. I'm Rodney Alsup, founder of the MBA News Digest and your host for today's webinar. Today's webinar is titled 10 Things You Need to Know About Working with an Online Program Manager. Alternatively, we could say things that your OPM may have not told you or may not tell you, but you really need to know. Now, I am joined by John Farrell, and John is the director of the part-time MBA program at Salle University. Now, John and I attended the online MBA conference in Dallas last October, and we noted a lot of conversation around the use of OPMs and various degrees of satisfaction or dissatisfaction with working with OPMs. At some point, we discussed the possibility of a webinar during that meeting, and so here we are. John was a member of the team at LaSalle that implemented an online MBA program using an OPM. Now, prior to that, he was the assistant dean at Rider University, where he was also involved in online programs. Now, he has more than 30 years of consulting experience, so our discussion today will draw on both his consulting and academic experience. John, welcome. But now before I turn this over to you, I want to cover just a few things that I guess I'll call them a little bit of housekeeping. First, something about the News Digest. Let me just share a few things. I curate and aggregate news for GME program managers, leaders, staff, and faculty. Now, my focus is on program management issues. The webinars and podcast series, it focuses on topics where we need more depth or where you all want more depth. You will experience this today, a lot more depth. Last year, I started writing a series of program management articles, that is, articles that focus on topics that are tactical in nature. Then the aggregation part of what I do results in what I call a quarterly aggregation report. Each quarter, I aggregate the articles I shared with the weekly subscribers, and the result is my take-home points from those articles, emerging trends, innovations, etc. And finally, I do provide some consultancies and workshops that focus on program management. Now, it would not be possible for me to do any of this if I didn't have some sponsors. So let me acknowledge that support for today's program, which comes from International Study Programs. Now, what they do is the heavy lifting when it comes to international academic study trips. When I was a program manager, I worked with ISP, and they did a great job for us. And I think you really need to take time to take a look at the services they provide. You can learn more about ISP at www.studyprograms.com. John?
Thank you very much. And I appreciate, Rodney, this opportunity to share with you and our colleagues out there the lessons that I've learned as time has gone on in putting an MBA program online. Today's objective really is to share with everybody what I've learned, better ways to collaborate, what are some of the ideas and things we have learned along the way and using an OPM to get our program online. And we put an MBA program online, just to give you a couple particulars. We started to develop it in February. By October 23rd, we actually launched the program. It's been a year and a half, and at this point in time, we're over 140 students. So we move pretty quickly, which is one of the interesting dimensions of having an OPM with you. What I'm going to share with you today is my experience as well as some composites about OPMs. Not every OPM has these perspectives, these behaviors, these dimensions, but over time and through various conversations with those who've worked in the area, I wanted to just put us all in a position where we could just share the lessons learned. What I will say right up front is an OPM is an incredibly valuable asset. And I think it's up to all of us. I can see at least a couple familiar names who are MBA or graduate program directors. to understand what it is an online program manager can do for us. So I'd like to share first the business side of the OPM, and each OPM is different, your contracts are different, but I think it's important that we recognize that OPMs are in business. And the sooner we understand that, and the sooner we begin to move forward understanding their business objectives and ours, the faster we get to the solution. So an OPM, and they are varying these days. We have privately held, we actually have a publicly traded OPM out there, and I think you'll see more public companies over time. But what does the OPM bring to the table? The first thing is financing, and that is really cash. This is something that can't get lost on us, and I think it's very important. The OPM is actually a bank, and we are paying interest by having some sort of revenue share. And for the most part, my conversations will revolve around those who are revenue sharing. I know some of the OPMs are breaking up their services and just offering specific pieces or consultancies. But your traditional OPM, if there is such an organization, has financing for your marketing expertise, technology, instructional design, recruiting resources, program course development, as well as support in the academic and the retention area. These are resources that we as universities have typically relied upon ourselves to get things done. With the opportunity to partner with an OPM and to be able to tap into the assets and expertise of the OPM, here's a chance for us to get up and running in an online program, as you can see with us, within 9 months. I'm sure many of you can reflect upon any of the projects and initiatives that you've had within your own organizations and point to maybe 1 or 2 initiatives you've did in 9 months, which to me is kind of the first lesson of what an OPM can bring to the table. And that is, they bring the drive to implement change. As difficult and as resistant to change that we are in academia, what they bring is a commitment to get the change done. They want to focus on getting the programs, standing them up, as they'll say. They want to make sure that you have in place the necessary engine to generate leads, to process applications, as well as admit and enroll students. Those are the intangibles when you start to take a look at what an OPM brings to the table. They also bring in different ways of doing business, which can rub certain people in universities the wrong way. That is, we've always done business a certain way over time, and we need to bring the faculty along. And change has never been this fast or this accelerated. And what I've seen with the OPMs is that's what they bring is. They bring that drive to solution, drive to implementation. Now, I wasn't involved in the actual selection of the OPM that we used here at LaSalle, but what I will share with you is one perspective, which is you need to understand what the OPM is good at, plain and simple. Do you need to buy all of these resources from an OPM, kind of the beginning to end, from program design all the way to academic support and retention? Or do you just need specific elements of expertise? There's a major university that worked with one of the online program managers for the entire suite of services. And over time, they found that with this particular OPM, what they were particularly good at was marketing and recruiting. And they redesigned and they reconfigured their contract just to focus on those 2 elements. The university itself had the technology and instructional design. It had grown and developed over the years, and there was no need to use the OPM to use that, to use their services. So make sure you understand what you have before you go and buy from the OPM. And again, of course, from a business point of view, what you buy from the OPM has a level of determination of what the actual revenue share will be. The more you buy, the more revenue you share. So all I can share with you is make sure you're buying what you need. In one instance, I can say there was an area that we really didn't need. And over time that will shift and change, but make sure that when the OPM comes to the table and says, we can take you and get your program up and running, make sure their resources are complementary to your resources. And then finally, what you can expect from your OPM is their drive to expand to other programs, their drive to change. And the one thing they'll do that we don't do particularly well at universities is they manage their cost. They invest where they're going to see results. So the initial part of your relationship with the OPM really parallels the kinds of teams that I've observed with OPMs. There's the marketing and initial discussions team and the sales and negotiation team. They may be one and the same. You'll need to, as I said, figure out what you want. I recommend that you talk to other institutions and understand the ways in which they've structured the contracts with the OPMs and the services they bought. You'll find that your OPM has an implementation team, and we found there's a handful of teams, at least with our OPM, one that's focused on curriculum program development, enrollment technology. You can read those elements. The one area that I found particularly important is with the marketing and creative team. They brought to the table to our institution a level of sophistication in marketing that was particularly meaningful and was able to start to drive significant interest in the program. And on an ongoing basis, now that we're 18 months in, there's operations and marketing continues. New things are being done. Websites are being improved. Search engine optimization's going, recruiting, and then retention. And what you'll see is throughout this, the most important thing I would hope for from an OPM is to have the managing director, the engagement partner, the program manager throughout. To me, coming from the consulting world, I would find it very difficult to buy something in a consulting and services way if I didn't know the guy or the gal who is going to be implementing. You may find that given this is such a rapidly growing industry and business, that the good project managers are hard to find, but I don't think it's, I think it's wise that you ask. So who's going to do the implementation? Who are the people who we're going to work with? To me, in the end, that's where you're going to be most successful, is with your implementation team and your operating team. So look for that constant, look for that individual who is part of the team throughout. You know, in Ernst & Young terms, it was your account partner, your engagement partner, the person who would be accountable to the company as well as to the university for delivery of all of the services. So I want to just wrap up with this, is that one of the key elements to success is not only for the OPM to have that engagement partner, that individual who's going to be on site spending a significant amount of time with you, but you also need to have that program manager throughout the implementation. Demand it. When you think about it, I'd say one of the most important elements for success in working with an OPM is having an engagement partner, an engagement manager who works well with you. And I can say from experience, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. If you have a good partner, it will accelerate the change, believe me. So as we move on to the business side of your OPM, and I think everybody needs to understand that. Couple of things you need to keep in mind. You're going to see projections of enrollments. You're going to see opportunities based in the marketing information. You're going to see financials that look so attractive. Remember, you're being sold. Bottom line, it's very hard to prove out the forecast, prove out the estimates of enrollments. But I think what's important is you take a look at what they're sharing with you, understand if there's any market research behind it. Some have market research, some doesn't. And remember that the estimates are there to help sell you on their services. Be skeptical, look at it carefully and cautiously. More than likely, the numbers are going to go down first. It almost always happens. And then maybe the numbers will get some footing, you'll get a good enrollment, you get good marketing, and the recruiting engine is running. But be careful, be skeptical of any of the numbers that are shared with you in the sale. And also, I'm very skeptical about the promise of increased visibility with your online program will help your non-online programs. I'm not quite sure that happens. I will say I'm not seeing it at the moment, actually. And I think all of us know the competition with hybrid programs and in-person programs is significant. So that type of sales pitch, just be skeptical and be cautious with what you listen to, and watch out what your CFO does with the information. The numbers are going to look good, and the numbers can look good. So now the contract with the OPM, and I think this is a particularly important element, and there's a couple of repositories of contracts out there. Next slide, here we go. A couple things you need to keep in mind, and it's obvious, but I think it is worthy of mentioning. They write these contracts all the time. The OPM, the revenue share, what's included in services, the terms, what programs are in, what programs will eventually be there. This is their business. They know those contracts and relationships with the delivery of services very well. More than likely, this is your university's first and perhaps only OPM contract. So make sure you get some counsel, make sure you begin to understand the dimensions of it. Make sure you don't buy something you really don't need. They'll want to sell you a grand suite of services. The question is, do you need all of those services? And I'll say in our instances, we certainly needed a few. To me, that was particularly important that we were able to focus on recruiting and marketing for sure, and some of the technology and online program design. That's particularly key. We knew that. Again, the OPM contracts are somewhat general and broad, at least the ones I've researched. And of course, nobody ever wants to share their own, but I think I'm trying to think, one of the education foundations went out there and used the Freedom of Information Act to put together a whole bunch of contracts for public institutions. And they're fairly simple. But the key is, what do they really tell you? And what kinds of commitments are you making? They'll want a long contractual term, 3 to 5 years, 5 years at a minimum. I think you're seeing some go to 10. Because they want to make the investment up front, which might be 1 to 2 years of significant investment as well as ongoing, but they want to be assured that they get paid off over a longer period of time. So keep in mind that OPMs are looking to increase revenue, grow revenue, and sustain revenue. I think one of the things that people have said, and I've heard this at conferences, is, oh, they're only in it for the money. Well, they might be in it for the money and the reputation and a great program, because with all of those, it actually helps their value proposition over time. They're looking for an annuity revenue stream. They want a quality program, but they're going to manage their costs, and it's important that we as an institution manage our costs too. The OPM, as you have pledged, you picked that term specifically, you've pledge your tuition dollars to them. And they share some, but not all of your goals. And remember, the OPM really isn't concerned with your operating expenses. Once they get their recruiting engine, their marketing engine, their retention engine, whatever you buy from them, once those are running, they make money on each credit hour, irrespective of your cost to deliver them. So I would urge you to understand that you've got to manage your costs. You just can't go ahead and pay lots of money to get all of these courses done, or premiums for online courses and the like. The second dimension is, over time, what's important, and I know we're running into this right now, is we need to affirm periodically what it is the OPM is doing and what it is we're doing here at LaSalle. One, to make sure there's no overlap, and two, to make sure that there are no places to drop the ball. And that's particularly important when students come on board. They may bring the student through the recruiting process, but they're your students. And it's important that you recognize that you just don't turn over all dimensions of student care to the OPM. They're most interested in having your students be retained, but the advising, the academic support, and all of that are typically from your team, which is going to cost you some time and energy as well. So when you look at it from a day-to-day basis, the challenge is how transparent can an OPM be? And I know I was very frustrated in the beginning because I kept getting the response, well, we'll see what we can share, we'll see what we can do. And at some point it became kind of frustrating because I never knew how well we're doing. And the answer was, well, just look at your enrollments, just look at your applications, just look at what we're delivering to you in terms of qualified students. But to me, it was more important so I could understand how well they were doing. As a business guy, I wanted to know how many leads, what are your categories of leads? I want to know a little bit more about the business as well as the marketing. I certainly understand their lack of transparency because that is their secret sauce, and I respect that, particularly when you get into some of the business analytics and the marketing analytics. That's why we got them, because they do that stuff pretty well. But just trying to recognize that you eventually will be partners. They start off as a vendor and maybe they'll turn into a partner. It's just understanding ways in which you can hold each other accountable in a very transparent and collegial way. In the end, you're on the hook for course development, program quality, student experience, faculty, student financial risk, and program reputation. They're on the hook for what it says in their contract, which is good. And it provides you a basis from which to monitor. But I think what we've found here is, although this can be a bit uncomfortable and not knowing all of what they're doing, is really to focus on the results and the way in which you can collaborate to drive better results. And then here's the bottom line, and this is something, it's just words of caution in working with an OPM. When there's a problem, and this element of secret sauce, I buy some of it. I guess we bought a lot of it here. But the accountability remains open. They're accountable for generating applications and enrollments, and we're comfortable with that. But one of the things I want to caution you about is there's, and I call them some ready-made excuses when things aren't going well, when performance is failing. Your price is too high. Your market's too saturated, and we're here in Philly, and boy, do I know that. Your brand doesn't travel very well, and I'll just share a quick point on this. We're a Philly school, and I would say about 90% of our online students are from the Philadelphia area. So in a sense, we're competing with the other schools of Philadelphia, in addition to we're competing with ourselves. So we're a regional brand, and I think you need to understand and be truly reflective and understand who you are. We will have students from across the country at some point. The ones that we have are connected to our organization, our institution somehow. Our doctor in Chicago was an undergraduate here. A guy who runs an animal hospital up in New York was an undergraduate. So we have those LaSalle connections. But we understand we're still a regional brand, and in a saturated market, you're putting yet another platform out there under your own brand. So that becomes a real challenge as well. Price is high. I don't know in your individual markets, when you take a look at some of the state schools and what they can offer in online programs, and $14,000 for an MBA is not that unusual. It's pretty competitive. And for you to be in a position to compete, you've got to have the quality program, the reputation, the great faculty, great courses, you know, the results, the outcomes, and all of that. But it's a price market. It truly is. And they'll remind you of that too, which is good. And that may require some more scholarships. That may require you lowering your price. Just be careful, because again, if you understand this going in, yeah, a lower price will generate more interest, but at what cost? Because remember, in the end, the lower price means you're sharing that investment with them again. And in your revenue share, you're getting fewer dollars for each credit hour sold. And then, of course, keeping your programs relevant. And you'll hear that, more specializations, more unique elements to your program. And then, of course, your reputation. And all of us are building our reputations in the online world. And good luck to those of you out there who are just starting out. It is fierce and it is competitive, and it's easy for somebody to take a look at a school in Ohio, then flip over to New Jersey, and then up to Boston when you start shopping for that online MBA.
John?
Yes, Rodney?
Is it, when they say the price is too high or when they say the market is saturated, can you ask them for evidence to support that that is the right direction that they're pointing you in?
You can, and I think particularly when we talk price and we talk the original price, we knew our pricing pretty well, and we knew our pricing in the market in our hybrid program, which is our in-person online combination program. We knew the pricing in a residential program, and I don't know. I assume most institutions have that standard chart of who's charging what where. So you can ask for it and understand it. You know, we have an anomaly here with an institution that's a state institution that has an incredibly low price. But when you add up all of the amounts of money that they're going to take from you in fees, which are close to 500 plus a semester, then it's right in there and competitive with us. But it's up to us to do the homework. The OPM will provide that information. I got to tell you, having been in this business for maybe 12 years now, the market research is just not that good, other than general trends. And I think all of us kind of struggle when we take a look at what the market research is. What we can see is what are the enrollments, what are the trends from in-person to hybrid, from hybrid to online, and in between. But again, that's the challenge. The way I've always looked at our program is we need to have this in our portfolio of offerings to the market, because not everybody can get to one of our campuses to do an MBA in person.
Right. Now,
so when we take a look at the problems, and there will be problems and there will be changes, I think a couple of things I'd like to just share is, remember, the OPM is a business partner, and ideally they go from being a vendor and somebody you're buying something from to truly being a partner. And I think we have a good partner ourselves. It took a while to get there. We worked very hard at driving the partnership. The second dimension that I think is particularly important, and then we'll go into the going forward, is we've always looked at the students as being our students. They don't belong to our partner. They belong to Salle University. And that is so important. They're not second-class students. They get all of the benefits, all of the events, and all of the activities. And we embrace them as much as we embrace our other students. You can't discriminate between the two. You got to make some accommodations. Things like career services and all of that aren't so easy to deliver. But, you know, we've had the philosophy, they're our students. So I'm going to talk about just going forward. And these are some of the lessons learned. These are, for those of you who may have heard my discussion back in December with the Pennsylvania Distance Learning Association, I just wanted to share with you, and this is kind of my point of view. As Rodney said, I was a consultant by training and done a lot of implementations. And I have to say that implementing an online MBA was as challenging as SAP or Oracle Financials in a corporation. But the bottom line is there's no pixie dust for working with an online program manager. It is about the relationships. It's the relationships with the faculty and their support to our faculty and instructional design. It's about the administration working with their executives, the program managers working together. It really is the way in which we work together. And we got to recognize that they are truly interested in our success. And, I felt a lot of resistance as we first started out. But then when people finally figured, hey, if they're successful, we're successful. And all of a sudden, we began to share this ownership of the online program. And I think that really changed the way in which we collaborate and work together. And I think we've engendered that philosophy throughout all of what we do with our online program manager. It's not a sidebar. In fact, our enrollments are getting to the point where we've got to stand up and pay attention, because it isn't a secondary platform. It's one of our, if you can have several primary, it's one of our primary platforms for an MBA. You'll find that with an OPM, the academic environment is unique, and you'd say, well, they work with academics all the time, and they do. But I want to share with you a couple of perspectives beyond what's here on the slides, and that is the OPM business is growing fast, and the talent is turning over, whether it's the people on the phones, the retention specialists, the technologists, or the program managers. So just beware, it's going to happen, that the people you start with may not be the people you finish with. And in a growing business, the positive thing is that people get promoted. So for example, the woman we started working with in marketing, who we had a great relationship with, got promoted. She was in charge of all MBA marketing for our provider. And we had to get comfortable with the new one. So there's going to be change. And academic institutions are used to some change, but not a lot, particularly when it relates to personnel. They don't change as quickly as you'll see with the online program manager. And then also, the instructional people are always out looking at the new ways in which to engage students in the classroom. We're very fortunate at our institution, where for our MBA team, our faculty were pretty comfortable with online learning, as they had worked in a hybrid environment for quite some time. On the nursing side, they needed more help from our vendor, our partner, in designing courses, structuring courses, and structuring the program overall. So again, it's a matter of working together on a program level, but also with the faculty, also with the administrators, making sure the data feeds, from technology team to technology team is there. And we're just not used to that kind of accelerated change in the environment. And because we're unique, and because there's an intellectual property ownership dimension, we're a little bit hesitant and slow to get on board. But I got to tell you, once a handful of our faculty got rolling, there didn't seem to be an issue. And again, like we've seen at other institutions, once you have a couple of changes in place, you have individuals developing new and better practices and best practices to make it happen. And that's what we found here once we started rolling. And we had to phase things in over time. We're fully up and running with all of our core courses. We've got a few more elective courses to be put in place. So when we take a look at the online challenge, and this is something I only point out that it's something, if you're looking to start it out, to move in the online world, there's going to be a lot of resistance. And again, many of us don't like change, but I kind of appreciated the way in which change was handed to me, which was, John, we've decided we're going to work with this partner. You have an MBA program. We'd like to have it up and running in 6 months. We bought 3 more months, but we knew the change was going to happen. So we all of a sudden recognized we needed to think a little differently about the use of technologies in the classroom, the way in which we design courses, and that is so important to the quality experience for your students. And take advantage of the pros that you have with your online program manager and the way in which they structure them. Again, here at our institution, we were lucky we had a great instructional design team, which has turned over itself, because the good individuals are in high demand as institutions go online on their own, as well as with partners. One of the things that's important is really to establish shared goals. And other than the revenue share, I think it's important that you have established accountable objectives, deliverable work plans. And as a consultant, I will say in the early days of this project, it drove me crazy that I couldn't point to a milestone or a schedule or work plan, what was going to be done by whom and all of that. Get that right up front. You would think that if you've done 20 or 30 institutions, you'd have best practices, templates, and all of that. It may not be there. But I think you ought to insist when you sit down and begin to get involved with an OPM and you start to partner, outline what are the tasks. I can remember the day I got the project plan, and my colleague Nicole will remember that I was floored at how simple it was, and how the lack of detail kind of left me wanting to understand, okay, there's 5 milestones, but how do we get there? What are you doing? What are we going to do? And all I'd say is demand that you establish goals, milestones, and then you hold each other accountable for the activities that are going there. And then the beauty of an OPM is time is money, and boy, they believe that all the time. They're interested in getting it up and running. They will push. I will say, at least in my experience, there's been no compromise. It's, we're going to push you hard because it's up to them. They don't earn any money until the first credit hour comes in. So when you think about that, that's pretty significant, different way of doing business than we're used to. You know, we're used to being ready when we're ready, and we'll get there. And if we miss a semester, we'll let it roll. Well, those days are gone, at least with an OPM. And then one other element that I think is particularly important, and like I said, I think we have a really good relationship with our online program manager and the rest of the team here at LaSalle, which is in technology, admissions, financial services, as well as instructional design. We're all about celebrating the victories. You know, celebrating when we hit the first 10 students, when we, you know, all of a sudden broke 100. These are all important things. When we went online, is to recognize all of those who contribute over and over again, and we recognize both sides. We see the team that's working the MBA program here. We just happen to have a group that's off-site, and they're doing our marketing, they're doing our recruiting, but we're on the phone and working with them all day as if we were working with somebody across campus. So it's all about driving the change and recognizing the role that the OPM can play. So again, we can be resistant, as I'm sure you've run into over time, but it's the way in which we behave and they behave, the OPM behaves. Ron, you go to the next slide, about getting the change in place. I know I've mentioned it twice, and this will be the third time, that it is about driving change and figuring out how best to do it and how best to accommodate it and not compromise academic integrity, and begin to recognize that you need a platform, an online platform, to make it happen these days. It may not be your singular platform. You may have 3 or 4 different ways to deliver. This is our MBA world, but it's going to happen. It's inevitable. I can't see an institution without some kind of online component. And we see, you know, the Harvards and the Whartons even doing it in their own particular way. So to me, like any project, any program, it's all about sharing. It's all about moving forward with the change. It's all about developing goals and recognizing, let's just get it done. You can fight it, you can resist it, but in the end, it's like, you know, for Nicole and I, October 23rd was an incredible important date, which was the day we opened the online window. And that was our focus. And I think over time, everybody is beginning to get it, that it is just another way to do education. So as I say, get over the resistance and get on with the change. And like any good change, like any good team, it really is about relationships. Nicole and I got on an airplane and went down and visited with our colleagues at their location in Dallas. We spent the day there. We wanted to know more. We wanted to meet them. We wanted to have lunch with them. We wanted to know that this is who we are. And of course, we're selling them on why our program's great the whole time. But it was all about building the relationship, spending time together, and recognizing that, yeah, you can't have lunch like you can with your colleagues on campus, but it's important that you invest time to work with their teams and to get to know their teams. And, you know, we've always said we want to be their best MBA partner. And we work hard to do that. And we understand what they can do, and we understand what they're not as good at. And, you know, that over time we'll be able to drive our success even further. And recognizing that you got to keep building the relationships as the team turns over and as change takes place. A couple more things, and then I'll open it up to questions. I'm mindful of the time here. One thing that's important, and this is, you know, the old consultant, John Farrell, talking, is you got to deal with the bad news straight on. Bottom line is problems really diminish in size, scope, or severity if not dealt with or handled. I've never seen that happen. The nice thing is with deadlines, with when you get the program up and running, you stand it up, you got to find the problems, fix them, and then move on. And I have to say, we've had some great collaborations over the phone, a lot, as well as in person. When a problem comes up, it gets taken care of within a matter of hours, if not a day or two. So we kind of deal with the problems and the bad news straight on. We track it, we log it like any other program implementation. And we found that the best way to get things done is act and don't delay. So then finally, I've always said you gotta rise above the clutter, find the problems, figure out the solutions, and then move forward. And again, when the opportunity is there to collaborate, I think what you'll find is that your partner will focus and help you collaborate. They will be in a position to bring in best practices. Well, we've seen this in other locations. You know, they can't tell you where. They'll come forward with ideas. They'll push you, and you just have to get used to it. I don't see it as a problem, because in the end, we all share that goal of driving it to a solution, driving it to a program that's operating. And for us, it's all about operating and growing, and now student satisfaction and accelerated completion of the degree. And we all share those goals. I truly believe our two teams, or one team in general. So then finally, you've got to, as I said, bring them into your culture. We've had, you know, members of our OPM team on campus here. You just got to keep sharing. And as I said, we try to be the best partner they have. And we keep working at it. And we keep reminding them that we're going to do that, because if they understand us and they understand our program and why we're different and better than other programs, and they can have a feel and they can speak like they know the LaSalle MBA program, we're all better off. So over time, we've done training sessions. We've given them our sales pitch. We've given them our information sessions so they can glean, you know, what we say and why we're different. We've given them our words through videos. For us, it's, again, an extension of our team. And quite frankly, I don't feel that it's a separate team. I think that we found success, particularly when we increased the focus on building the relationships and driving the change. When we had those two things, it was great to move forward. And then finally, my final thoughts are, be skeptical, but be open to change. And remember, you're going to work with your OPM for a minimum of 3 to 5 years, and more likely 10. So getting that good working relationship, and this, like I said, there's no pixie dust. the faster and the easier the change will happen, and you'll both begin to enjoy the success of that change. So I hope I ended on a good note, as skeptical as I may have started out with.
I think you ended on a very good note, John. Let me, while people are feeding some questions in, let me ask a couple.
Sure.
Let's talk about analytics for a second. Is there a common dashboard or anything around learning analytics or sales funnel analytics that you all are provided on a regular basis from your OPM?
We were not. And that was one of the areas that was a bit frustrating for me, because I really wanted to know and understand. And that's where that's part of the magic that they have, really. If there is, with an OPM, they've got to be really good at that, whether it's search engine optimization and click-through rates and pipeline management and all of that. That, to me, I am very comfortable that they're doing okay because I'm seeing the results. I'm a bit frustrated that I can't learn from it. I can't see that, they're taking 500 leads and turning them into 50 applications. I don't see that. I respect that's what we're buying from them. So that is a bit frustrating on the analytics side. The analytics we see are the qualified applications. And I will say, for the most part, we're getting qualified students. So if they're delivering to me a level of qualified student who, gets pretty close to our admission standards or exceeds them, then I don't know if there's much value I can add when they're out there driving the interest in our program from inquiry to call to application. So I'll leave it at that. I would love to know more, but it isn't going to happen.
Understand. We have a question here. You mentioned the various platforms. Are your online classes on a different platform than your face-to-face classes? And
No.
if so, is transferring of content difficult?
That's a good point, and I should have mentioned it. No, we're on Canvas, and everything we do online and hybrid and in person is Canvas. I know there are OPMs out there that have their own platform, and that's great, and you pay for that as well. But we're using Canvas. Stuff works well as long as you can keep up with what Canvas can do. And I know my prior institution, we didn't even come close to leveraging the power of it. And here I'm seeing more and more people recognize Canvas is pretty powerful if you can work with it, as well as bring in the add-ons and the I don't know what you call them, the apps that you can link into Canvas. So we're using our regular platform, which makes it easier. There's not a lot of learning curve on the part of the faculty, which, let's face it, we've got to get them comfortable and up and running quickly.
Now, using more of the Canvas capabilities, is that partially from pressure from the OPM to push the level or the quality of the program up, or is it as a result of faculty feeling pressure to push it up and they want to learn new things and use it?
I think it's the faculty. Our faculty here want to do better. They want to try new things. To me, I like that. I don't think we feel pressure, particularly in business school, because we don't do a lot of work with the instructional design part of our OPM. We in the business school use a lot of our internal guys and gals, and they're pretty darn good. And they're the ones who push us to consistency, to structure, to making sure we have the right look and feel, and that we're looking at the different tools and add-ons within the Canvas domain.
Another question about the online draining away or pulling students away from the other programs. Do you see that, or was it a real impact at all?
We're seeing that in a couple ways. One is tangibly when we have some hybrid students who want to go online. We understand that. I think we are also seeing that the demand for online programs continues to increase, whereas the demand for hybrid programs is flat at best. And I'm sure my colleagues out there will back me up on that, unless you're in a unique market. It is challenging. I think we're stable. How much growth we'll be able to get on the hybrid side, I'm sure I'll be told how much I should get, which is great. Because herein lies the one thing that I've found, and I'll just share this. I'm sure many of my colleagues have realized it. The two platforms are for two different populations, or two sets of populations. And I believe the hybrid platform is ideal for those young rising professionals who need to get the polish, who need to be challenged and can use the classroom rather than make a mistake in front of their boss. So that 2 to 7 years, I think the classroom is particularly important to their professional development. And that's reflected in the average age and experience of our online students. What we see on the other side is the guys and gals who have made their way 15 years into their career. They know who they are. They need that MBA as the credential. They don't have time to come to class because they're balancing family, work, and education. So we're finding a bit of an older population by at least 2 years in the online program. So there's a different demographic, and I think that's the way in which we approach it. I think where we'll see the expansion of the online program will be beyond our market. And I fully hope that we will maintain and grow our hybrid program as well, because there's a different population that needs a different bit of the education.
Okay. Another question that came in is, I guess I'd call it unintended cost or cost on your all's end, other than time, realizing that starting up a program like this requires a lot of time and effort of staff and faculty. And what were some of the other costs that you incurred? Unexpected, I guess.
There were a couple of things that I will share with you. I think there was, it's an intangible, but it's all of a sudden we're sharing our destiny with an outsider. And that's reflected on the time to approve things. That's reflected on, hey, we're still in control. It was reflected on seeing some of the great work that our partner did relative to what we would do. So it's kind of letting somebody in, which got in the way sometimes. We slowed things down when they should have been faster unnecessarily. The other element, I think, and this is something that I'll share with you, is we need to have the organization understand the importance of this platform, not just to the financial results, but to our reputation. And, we're pushing harder on our rankings and being in that position such that we can not only say we have an online, but say we have one of the best online programs, which, we're getting close to being there. So it's a recognition throughout the institution of, hey, this is important. This needs caring and feeding, and it's like any other program. It's not a hobby. It's not a sidebar. It's real. And you look at our numbers and you can't help but say it's real. So in terms of other costs, I think it's just the resistance. But, I have to say, for our faculty to do the job they did that quickly, to get the courses up and running, we went from hybrid for the most part into online. So there wasn't that big a leap. But I didn't see any major unintended costs other than there are students now, and I have to worry, and Nicole has to worry about 150 new students. I mean, there's a cost with that, and it's not that all the cost is on the OPM, and I think that's part of our education process going forward, which is, we're spending a lot of time with our online students as we would any student, because that's the way we've approached it.
What about, did you all compensate faculty for designing new courses or anything?
We did. We had a conversion stipend to help us get there. It wasn't significant. It was less than an adjunct overload, I guess, in general terms. But what it helped was it just gave them a little incentive and helped them with the heavy lifting that we needed to have. So,
how about adjunct faculty? Any adjuncts involved or added onto this program?
Yeah, we with our adjuncts right now, we're at the point we've got adjuncts not only working our hybrid, but we're going to have them doing the online. And given many of our adjuncts have taught for years, this is a continuation of teaching with us. And the nice thing is there's still a group of adjuncts out there, at least in our region, who have been teaching online for years. So there's a whole new universe of potential faculty for us.
Did they work with the OPM course designers, or did they work with the LaSalle course designers?
They in the business school, they work with our designers,
Okay.
our instructional design people. Yep.
How much staff time is spent with the OPM, and are you planning to add staff as a result of the program growth?
I think we'll have to at some point. I am very optimistic at the growth we're going to see. We've got to do things like program reviews. We've got to, all of a sudden be a bit more scientific with our student handling. The areas that I think we need to address are career services and being supportive of our students out there to the extent they need. So we will need some more support along the way as we continue to grow. But I think that will be driven by students and enrollment.
Okay.
I don't think we have to add another person. I think we're just going to drive ourselves to naturally bringing on another advisor, bringing on another individual to help us with admissions.
Okay. And one final question that contractually you may not be able to answer, but what is your percentage that the OPM gets of their?
You knew the exact answer.
Okay.
And truth be told, I officially don't know it.
Okay. I understand.
It's one of those secrets, but I will tell you this day and age, it's a lot easier to negotiate that percentage than perhaps what it was even 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So don't be afraid to negotiate it, and don't be afraid to negotiate out services you may not need. The area in which I would ask all of us to take a look at is once the students are on board, once they're being advised, what is it that your OPM will do with retention?
Right.
And what's different than what you'll do? And there may be an opportunity to back off of your sharing percentage there.
John, we've got a few more questions in here, but I think you and I can answer them one-off when we finish up here.
Okay.
I want to thank everyone for attending. And John, a special thanks for sharing your knowledge and your time today. This has been exceptionally good for me. And I'm sure that based on the number of questions that we're getting, that it was the same for the participants.
Thank you. I appreciate having the opportunity.
Good, good. A brief survey is going to appear for you to provide feedback. So if you'll take some time to fill that out, I would appreciate it. You'll receive an email from me letting you know when the YouTube recording is available and the audio podcast is available. I'll send that out. And my next webinar is going to be April 3rd, the impact of international residencies on students' lives. Victoria Kish, founder of and managing director of ISP International Study Programs, they just completed a fairly comprehensive study of their students that have participated in their programs, and she's going to report those results. Have a great day, and as always, feel free to
Thank you all very much.
Rodney Alsup at MBAnewsdigest.com.